Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am very happy to be with you on a Friday. It is not Tuesday, but as you know, if you watched the previous episode, we have 2 episodes this week for a few different reasons. As we get started, though, I do want to remind you, as always, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. That is a huge help to the algorithm. Gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. It is always greatly appreciated, whatever support you give. Speaking of support, if you are willing to support in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip or a donation. It helps not just this podcast, but the network as a whole. It's very much appreciated. As I just said, all support is appreciated. While you're there, if you want to leave a question or a comment as well, great. Maybe you have a comment on a recent episode or author interview. Maybe you have a question for me or a question about one of those author interviews. I would love to hear them and engage with them at a later episode. So again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you, as always, for all of the support you've given this podcast, no matter what form that support takes. Whether you've been with me from the beginning, you just started watching or listening, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for everything. How has your week been? It's Friday, so I hope that you have the weekend that you need coming up, whether that is to... Everyone recharges differently, so maybe you need a lot of social time. Maybe you need no social time. Maybe you need to be productive. Whatever that is, I hope that for you this weekend, and I hope you have some great plans coming up. I mentioned on Tuesday's episode that on Tuesday I'd taken my husband to the airport. He was going back to the United States for his father's funeral. The funeral was today, so it's a bit of a hard day. I was able to watch the service on Zoom, which I'm greatly appreciative of. Technology is great, except when it's not. More on that later. But I was able to watch it and be there, at least in spirit. And I know it's a very hard day for my husband. It's a hard day as well, as we remember my father-in-law, celebrate his life, and grieve with family members. It's good. I'm very glad that he's home. And for those of you who have sent your condolences, your well wishes, as I said, all support is greatly appreciated, especially that. I really appreciate to everyone who's reached out, sending thoughts, love, hugs, prayers, good vibes, whatever it is. It's all very much appreciated. Thank you. So that was hard today. And then this episode, technology is great, except when it's not. This is the 4th time I've sat down to record this episode, and weird things keep happening technologically wise. So here's fingers crossed that the 4th time is a charm and that we're going to make it through this recording of get this episode out as it's supposed to be. Thank goodness we're not live, because this would have been a disaster. A sugar honey iced tea show, if you will. We don't swear on this podcast very much. We're hoping. How about we talk about a book? Content warning, this book does deal with death and grief. It's actually kind of a good segue from my earlier conversation about the service for today, but this does deal with the death of a child, so please be aware that that's not all of that this book is about, but it is a big part of the beginning of the book, the story arc of the main character, and we do talk about it in the interview, so please be aware of that. I am speaking today with author Lisa C. Taylor about her novel, The Shape of What Remains. Let me go ahead and give you the description of this book. The Shape of What Remains. What did 6-year-old Serena see that caused her to dart out in the road on a clear November morning while waiting for the school bus with her mother? Teresa Calvano has spent a decade blaming herself for Serena's death and wishing it was her husband Luke who was with Serena that day, so the guilt didn't fall so heavily on her shoulders. When her husband and her friends lose patience with her failure to get back to life, Teresa turns to books, therapy, and Janis Joplin to address her continued unraveling. Is there a cure for grief? In Teresa's world, her research and life as a successful English professor fail to offer the one thing she wants most: another day with her 6-year-old daughter. And so, again, that is the description of The Shape of What Remains by Lisa C. Taylor. as I said at the beginning, it does deal with the loss of a child. It deals with grief. That's not all that this book is about. I'm not going to tell you a lot of what this book is about because you need to read it. Neither is Lisa. You will want to read this book. You will want to find out more of what this book is about, what happens with these characters. It does deal with that death of a child. It has been 10 years since that death occurred, and that's when it opens. We do get kind of flashbacks to what happened or remembrances, retellings of what happened, but it opens 10 years after that death occurred. And Teresa is still dealing with that grief, of course, but our society likes to put arbitrary kind of timelines on things. And so a lot of her friends, some family have just decided that she's spent too long grieving. She needs to move on. They don't see the validity in her timeline. They don't understand why she's still grieving, why she can't seem to move on and just deal with it and get on with life. And that's a lot of her character arc and motivation starts there, and then we see what happens. And a lot of things happen in this book with this character, and so we move through this process with Teresa as she is navigating this course, as she is trying to figure out what's going on with her marriage, what's going on with her son, who is older than Serena. He's just started college. He's 18, so he's 2 years older than Serena. What's going on with her career? Is she in perimenopause? Like, everything that's going on in her life and what is going to happen. So there's a lot of relationships. There are a lot of just figuring out life kind of stuff. So I'm going to let Lisa tell you about this book, of course, and you can hear more. So let's go ahead. The book, of course, is called The Shape of What Remains. The author is Lisa C. Taylor. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk to you about your novel, The Shape of What Remains. Before we get to that, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself so that my listeners can get to know you a bit.
Sure. My name is Lisa C. Taylor, and I have long been a writer. I write poetry, fiction, and a little bit of nonfiction that you can find online. I haven't published a book of nonfiction, but I published short stories, and I have 3 full-length collections of poetry and 2 chapbooks. So that was my first, publications were always in poetry. And I even went and got an MFA in creative writing, specializing in poetry. But then I kind of fell in love with fiction, and it's kind of it's a long and complicated story how I got there. But I did show a story to an Irish writer friend, and she said, "Why are you not publishing fiction?" And I
Hmm.
said, "Well, because I'm a poet, I don't necessarily do that." And I think she really gave me the confidence to move forward with that. And my Irish publisher, which I had for a lot of my books, encouraged me to finish a collection of short stories. So I did. And later I did another collection of short stories, and then I had a collection of poetry in 2022. So I'm really kind of in love with stories, and
Hmm.
I just am. And I think they're really needed right now. So,
Yeah,
world, I think we've always turned to stories,
I
for,
agree.
yeah, for stress, for escapism, for all sorts of things. And
Hmm.
I've always,
Celebration,
yep.
everything. Yeah.
And I've always been a reader. I mean, I started reading early and I never stopped. So, yeah.
I'm the same, so I understand that
Yeah.
sentiment. Yes. Can you give an overview of the story of The Shape of What Remains?
Sure. So The Shape of What Remains, and I have a handy copy of it, is it's one woman's story. After she lost her daughter, she was waiting for her daughter with a school bus. This is not a spoiler. The book actually opens ten years later,
Yeah,
so I won't give any spoilers. And she's waiting for the school bus with her daughter, and her daughter inexplicably runs out in the road. Her daughter is 6, and you don't think 6-year-olds do that. She will never know why that happened, and
right.
she just can never know that. There's no answer to that question, which is part of what makes this so difficult. But anyway, there's a truck driver, just, the perfect storm of bad things, who is late to an interview, really needs the job, doesn't see her, thinks maybe she's a deer or an animal, and hits her, and she is killed. So the book opens 10 years later. Teresa Calvano is my main character. She is so mired in grief. People in her life have moved on, and she has an older son, Wyatt, who's starting his first year of college. And she was a full professor. Now she teaches one class and can really kind of barely handle that, and is in a book group. So those are her two activities that she does in her life. That's kind of it. Her husband is a professor. He's gone a lot, um, more and more and more as time goes on. So she suspects he's having affairs and he's just moved on with his life. And they've moved a couple of times because the reminders of her daughter really make her crazy, and also that a lot of her former friends are really uncomfortable with her. So she
Hmm.
moves to avoid that because they just don't know what to do with her, which is true of grief, that
Yes.
people don't know what to do.
Yep.
So, um, I'm interested in this. I had a counseling career for 18 years, which is like the piece of trivia people don't know about me. Uh, and I've always been interested in grief and in our culture and how, yeah, and I just want to say how badly we do it. I
Yeah.
really just think we do it badly. We give people artificial timelines, and
Hmm.
everybody's different.
Yes.
Uh, and it's not a linear process. I mean, you could think you're over it, you lose a loved one, and all of us are united across the world in grief, because grief is something everybody will feel. If
Yeah.
you're 20 and you've not felt it yet, you will, because we're all going to lose loved ones. It's just part of life.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just think that there aren't a lot of outlets for that. And there are grieving groups, there are places you can go. And I did a lot of research for this book about that, and I can speak to that a little bit. But it's not my personal story, it is fiction.
Hmm.
However, life does imitate art sometimes, and I actually had a next door neighbor who lost a 6-year-old
Oh,
3 years after I was already into writing this book, which is, you
wow.
know, really strange.
Yeah.
Not to an accident, but to a disease, but
Hmm.
still, it's just, it's universal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not so much with kids, but it is universal.
It's universal. Yeah. So was grief really your jumping off point for the story? Was that the inspiration for the book as a whole?
The inspiration for the book was a short story that is in my first short story collection. It's called Monuments. And I had two short stories in that collection that I knew would be novels. At the
Mhm.
time that collection was published, which was 2015, I was working full time. And when I say working full time, if you know me, you know that means more than full time. I'm on, committees and boards, and I've just always been active with nonprofits. There was a creative council, and here I'm on the creative district board. So yeah, I always did a whole lot of stuff. I couldn't write a novel. I just didn't have enough time to do it. So I sort of just put it aside and said, someday in my life I'll have this time. And then
Mm-hmm.
we moved in the middle of COVID.
Mm.
And so I had time. So
Right.
I wrote it, and I just, it was nagging at me. So it just, like, Teresa's voice was in my head, kind of telling me, that sounds really wacky, but that's my writing process, that she really spoke to me, and she
Mm-hmm.
had a much bigger story, and I needed to tell it. And I really didn't know when I was writing it how it was going to end up, but I'm very
Oh,
happy with how it ended up. I mean, and there are parts of it that I didn't want to write, but I felt like they had to be written.
okay.
It's a
Yeah.
funny process being a writer.
It's you're
Wacky.
not the only one to say that. Characters kind of take over in some ways.
Yeah,
Um,
they live in your head
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. I've heard other authors talk about how characters talk to them, characters change their mind about things, characters say, nope, this is how things are going to be. I like that Teresa was such a strong voice and she had so much to say that she said, mm-mm, nope, I need more than just a short story. You're going to give me a whole novel and we're going to talk about these things that need to be discussed. And I think there's a lot of good topics that are in this novel. So I think Teresa was right to push for that full novel. We're going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about Teresa as the main character, what you're going to like about her as readers. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Lisa C. Taylor. This is just your quick second and final reminder that if you want to support the podcast and network as a whole, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. Leaving a donation helps, again, the entire network. You can also leave a question or a comment. You're seeing that in the video next to me. You'll also see it scrolling throughout the episode. So if you need a reminder of the link, you can find it throughout the episode, gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you again. Before the break, Lisa was talking about how this was a short story and grew into a novel. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Also, this is a book that she wrote during COVID. If COVID did anything for us, it gave us a lot of new books, a lot of books that might not have been written. So I am appreciative of COVID for that fact right there. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Lisa. Let's talk a little bit more about Teresa as the main character, because I can imagine that she would be a challenge to write in some ways, because you do want to display, you do want to have the reader understand just the depths of her grief, but it's also hard as the reader to step into that reality. So how did you balance that?
Well, I just want to say that, and I have to say this is not a depressing book. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it really isn't. And part of it is that she's kind of a smart ass.
Yeah.
You know, she's got a real wit about her. She's very smart and she's self-deprecating. And I feel like her humanity kind of saves it from being a really depressing read. She's just not afraid to assert herself. She comes back with things. She also has a really great relationship with her mother-in-law, who is, I think, probably my favorite character in the book. I really like
need her own story at some point.
Yeah. I have two sisters-in-law who asked me if that mother-in-law is based on my mother-in-law, who is deceased now, who was absolutely wonderful. And I guess unconsciously in some ways, maybe, but she's nothing like that. She was nothing like that. She wasn't, she didn't dress like that. She wasn't like that. But in terms of the absolute saying the right thing, not being afraid to face things, she's like that. And being very unconditional with her daughter-in-law, which was really necessary because Teresa's husband, Luke, who a lot of people dislike. I've heard from a lot of readers, boy, why he's a real jerk. I don't think he's a jerk. And I'm the writer, but it's up to readers to figure that out. But and I have a lot of reasons for not thinking he's a terrible person, even though he does terrible things. Because let's face it, everybody does terrible things sometimes. We all do stuff we regret. He just has a very different way of coping than she does, and some of it is pretty abhorrent.
Yeah.
It just is, but that is what it is. Grief is tough, really tough for everybody. But I like her. I mean, I think she's a smart ass. She's got real humanity. And I liked her as a character, even though there were times when I, as the writer, said, "No, don't do that. That's a really bad idea." And
she didn't listen, did she?
She doesn't listen. She's going to do it anyway. She was kind of incorrigible. So,
well, she reads and she listens to Janis Joplin. So for me, those were two good points in her favor. There's nothing like blaring Janis in the car at key moments.
And the Janis thing came to me like out of nowhere. I'm not even a really big fan of Janis Joplin or anything, but I thought, boy, if there's ever a singer who knew despair, it would be Janis Joplin. I mean, she was despair embodied. And obviously her life was that way. She died very tragically, very young, like a lot of rock stars. But, I listened over and over while I was writing it to her, and I thought, boy, it's just, there's so much pain in those lyrics. And I could
Hmm.
see how it would speak to her. And then it's also a connection to her father, who she hasn't seen in decades.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I can understand why people might not like Luke, her husband, but I also understand that grief hits everyone differently and that, he's coping with it differently. Was this always from one point of view, or did you ever consider having Luke's or even Wyatt's points of view included?
I did consider that, and actually, when you get to what you asked me what I'm working on next, I am writing something in two voices. I tried it. I really did try doing two voices with this, and it wouldn't work.
Mm,
It didn't work. It was clearly her story, so there's a bias to it for sure, And I understand why people don't like him. He does bad things, and
yeah.
he is kind of a jerk, but he's also likable in other ways, which is why the earlier story is important because it's important to have their history and
Hmm.
understand the very strong connection they had in the beginning before the accident.
Yeah.
They did have a very strong connection. They're very intellectually well matched, which is hard.
Mhm.
They're well matched in terms of their wit, so they lost a lot of that because she's depressed,
Yeah.
and she's not the same person. She never will be the same person, but because
No.
you grief remakes us, it just does, which is not ba all bad. It's sort of like PTSD. It's, traumatic incidents remake us, but
Hmm.
who we become is still us, and it's just a different us. And yeah, I just think that that's important too.
Yeah. You mentioned that we put unrealistic and made up timelines on grief, which we absolutely do because the phrase "you should be over this by now" is often commonly used. I've
Yep.
worked as well with a lot of people in grief and those situations. Is that something that you wanted to highlight in the story, or it was? I mean, it's obviously a byproduct of the story, but did you want it to be? Excuse me. Did you want to be very specific about it?
Yeah, I had a time in my life that when I was doing counseling where I actually led grieving groups with a woman who was way more of an expert than I was. I was never an expert on it. And I learned from her that we just, we put these artificial timelines. And I remember because I was working in a school at the time, and I remember I had a student I was working with whose mother was dying of cancer. And I had an argument with the math teacher. And she said, well, she should just focus on her homework because that way she would, get beyond this. And I said, I
Mm-mm.
wanted to say, I didn't say, you know nothing about grief. Homework is the last thing on her mind. You gotta like cut her some slack here. She's
Yeah.
grieving her mother. Her mother's gonna die. This is the worst thing in the world that could happen to an adolescent girl.
Yeah.
And she didn't get it. And lots of people don't get it. They
Yeah.
really think that distraction is going to work, and distraction does not work. It
Right.
really doesn't. You can tamp it down, but it's still there. It's,
Hmm.
we all know how to tamp it down. You have to go to work. Something bad happened that morning. You can't really deal with it, and you have to go to work because you need the money. You don't talk about it, but it's still there. You
Yeah.
know, you've got to deal with it. So I know that from my when I was in the field of counseling that things that we suppress are still there and they have to be handled at some point. And some
Yeah.
people are better than others at just, covering it over or not dealing with it. And Luke is certainly an example of that, stuffing his feelings, absolutely throwing himself into work.
Yeah.
Um, and also perhaps other women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I leave some
Unfortunately.
of that ambiguous. We don't know just how bad he was.
Right.
Up to
Right.
the to figure out.
But I think that's what makes Beth, again, such a compelling character is that she just allows Teresa to be.
Right.
She doesn't put those expectations on the grief timeline. She just, and not everyone can do that because even if we think sometimes that we're being patient, sometimes we ourselves get impatient and with like, okay, I'm tired of hearing about this, or,
Right.
I have my own stuff. I can't take on your grief as well.
Yeah.
But Beth is really good about just letting her be.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite parts that from Bess was that she has a conversation with Teresa about losing her husband, Dominic, who dies of heart failure or something, and she remarries. And she tells Teresa he was her one love. That
Hmm.
yes, she's got this guy now, and it's like the one her mother probably would have wanted her to marry, and he's great, and he's her religion, and all that, and they travel together and all that. But she said he's not her love. Her love was Dominic. She'll never have somebody she loves that much. And Teresa mulls that over. Like, is Luke my love? If so,
Yeah.
I'm a real loser because he's cheating on me. But maybe it turns out that he is. And I don't want to create any spoilers about where she goes with that, because if you read the book. But I just think that's kind of really insightful of Bess,
Yeah.
that she feels like you can move on in your life, but things don't go away. Like the hurt of her losing her husband, who was really, a great love in her life, is never going to go away. But
Yeah.
she has a busy life and a book group, and she travels, and she, does the right things to keep her life going because she's alive.
Yeah.
But she doesn't forget, and I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Teresa needs to go on her grief journey. She needs to be functional, and she
Right.
needs to find joy in her life, but she will never forget Serena,
Yeah.
her daughter. Never. I mean, it's always going to be a part of her.
Exactly. Okay, so let me apologize for continuously calling a character by the wrong name, even though Lisa very gently kept referring to her by the correct name. It is Bess, not Beth. My brain just was not, I don't know, was not computing that. I read the name Bess. My brain kept saying Beth. I apologize to a fictional character, but I apologize more to the author. I apologize to Lisa for continually saying the wrong name of a character, and a character that I really liked, that I appreciated for the role she played in this book. And like I said, she kind of needs her own book. I'd love to hear more of her story. I just really liked her, despite getting her name wrong. We're going to take our second break of this episode. When we come back, what Lisa hopes readers might take away from the book. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Lisa C. Taylor. Before the break, we were talking about Bess, who is a secondary character but very important to the plot. So let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Lisa. You said earlier, this is not a depressing book, and it's not. I know we're talking a lot about grief because that's the foundation. You have to have that in order to get to where the book goes. What do you hope readers will take away from the book?
Well, really interesting thing that's happened, and I did a 22 stop book tour, is that at almost every reading, somebody came up to me and said, you really nailed it on this book. I lost a daughter, or I had a miscarriage, or I lost a friend, and it feels like you understood my grief journey. And it's like a couple of people said it's really the first book I read that felt that way, and nothing made me happier than that, because that was my desire to say, you're not doing it wrong, you're doing it okay, and also grief is everybody's issue. We all have it. We all will have it. Maybe when you're 5, you haven't suffered any loss, but even children suffer the loss of a pet, and that's really big for them, or a
Mm-hmm.
grandparent, or a great grandparent.
Yeah.
And if they were close, that's really big for them. So it's something we really need to do better with as a culture. I think we're pretty terrible with it, which is kind of why I felt compelled to tell this story.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
You mentioned research earlier. Were there other areas that you researched for the book?
Well, I certainly researched the grief thing and found compassionate friends, which
Hmm.
ended up helping my neighbor who lost a daughter because I referred her to that and it was really helpful to her. And that's the national, I think it's even international organization that helps parents who have lost children. And it can be anything from a miscarriage all the way through adult children, because it's still the grief journey. And they're very, very good with that. And they gave me permission to use a quote and then to also acknowledge them in the back of the book. I did that. I talked to a lot of psychologists. I have a lot of friends who are therapists. I have a daughter-in-law who's a therapist. She actually helped me with the gender stuff in the book and why it are my college because I'm not 19.
Yeah.
Although I taught college and I taught at an arts high school, so I know some of that. And actually, I took the dress and all that stuff from my own experience with, and every generation reinvents how they can kind of shock adults,
Yes.
by wearing see-through pants or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And I like Teresa because that was probably the only thing that felt like something I would say, which was that I don't really care what students are wearing as long as they're listening and doing stuff. They can come in naked, it doesn't matter to me.
She
I'm
says
really,
something about if they understand. I can't remember which female author she quotes, but if they get this or they understand this, they can be naked.
they can be naked wearing a spacesuit. I mean,
Yeah,
I
a
did
space.
actually teach somebody that was wearing Martian eye contact lenses. Knock yourself out. I don't care. Shave your head, tattoo your face. It doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Just just get engaged with the literature. That's all I
Right.
care about. So,
Right.
and I don't shock, language doesn't shock me. Though I learned some good words when I was teaching
I
college.
was just gonna say language doesn't shock me, but it confuses me sometimes with
Yeah.
my Gen
Every-
Alpha niece. I sometimes look at her like, are we
Yeah.
speaking the same language?
Well, every generation tries to invent new
Yeah.
stuff, and it's kind of cool. I mean, we did it, and
Yeah, we
it is kind of cool. But
yeah.
yeah, so I feel like she's probably a very good professor that way because she's not judgmental. She really
Hmm.
just wants to reach them, and she doesn't really care what they're wearing or what their trends are or who they're dating or if they're straight, gay, trans. She doesn't care about any of that. She's
Right.
very accepting of people, which is, I think, a positive quality for her.
Yeah.
Uh, even though she's hurting. So
Right.
yeah, I did do a lot of research. I talked to a lot of people, and I had beta readers. They're
Hmm.
acknowledged in the book, which are early readers who read it before it was really refined, and uh, they kind of helped me because I knew I hadn't gotten the ending yet. The ending just came, it was an epiphany. It came to me,
Mm.
and all my writer friends loved it. They said, "You got it. That's it."
Nice.
And but I haven't done that with the book I'm working on now yet. I'm not the ending,
Well,
so.
you never know. It could
Yeah,
still be out there.
yeah.
Although I imagine the waiting is hard.
Yes, I'll get
Yeah.
there.
Yes. In terms of characters, so you said Teresa just kind of wouldn't let you go, and she said I have more of a story, but um, typically, whether it's short stories or novels, do you have a really good picture of characters before you start writing, or do they evolve as you write?
They have,
Combination thereof.
yeah, I think they evolve as I write. I didn't have a physical fix on her before I started writing, but then she just became alive for me, and I really got a fix of like what she might wear. I mean, I many things that are not in the book because people don't really care what people are wearing,
Right.
but I have it in my head like what you would like, and then I got the whole basil thing that she loves basil, and Serena liked basil, and when I had my launch for this book, we had basil themed snacks.
Oh, nice.
Were really delicious. So.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
so
was like,
okay, besides pesto, and I can think of like a few other basil things, what did you have? Now I'm curious.
we had caprese salads. We
Mm,
had
yep, yep.
focaccia with basil. We have a really nice restaurant that was right next to the little bookstore in town, so they catered it, and they had skewers with mozzarella and pieces of basil. It was delicious. Everything
Yeah,
was good,
yeah.
and mostly it was actually all vegetarian, which was nice. If I
Hmm.
could have done it, there was a place in Durango that makes basil lemonade
Yeah. Oh,
that's
that's good.
delicious.
So good.
Oh, good. But it's too far away, so I
Yeah.
didn't do that. And this place sells wine, so they kind of wanted to sell wine. I sprung for some bottles of wine.
Nice. Thank you
So
for using the word caprese because when I said pesto, I was thinking that's what I was picturing, but my brain said, "Mm, nope, we're not coming up with that word anytime."
yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank
but
you.
it's wonderful. I love it. And in fact, I had Bess and Teresa out to lunch eating that, and how
Yes,
delicious it was.
yes. You've written poetry and then you started doing short stories. There's got to be pros and cons to each, but what were some challenges to writing a novel versus a poetry or short story?
Well, it's many, many, many balls in the air. So that was the hardest thing for me, that they have to age. Silly things like that you don't think of in a short story. You don't have to age
Mhm.
people in a short story. I mean, not usually. So I had to think, when are their birthdays and White's got to get older. And then when he's at college, he's going to go back to college. So he has to now be a sophomore. He can't be a freshman
Right,
anymore,
yeah.
assuming he passed. So yeah,
Continuity, sure.
yeah, things like that were trickier for me. But I came to love it. And now I'm kind of really sold on the novel form. As I said, I'm actually finished with probably 30th draft of a second novel, which also came from a short story in that same collection. And that one is told in two voices, very different type of story,
Yeah.
and much harder to do the two voices. But I've tried it not doing it, and it wants to be in two voices.
This says
It's
no.
gonna kick my butt, and it's gonna be in two voices. So, and it's just a really different type of story. It's got there's nothing like this in it. It's an interesting story about a relationship between an attorney who defends the criminally insane and a social worker for foreign adoption, who were their mothers were best friends. They were childhood friends, and they meet again at his mother's funeral. He's half Vietnamese and half Irish. His mother was a war bride. So there's a whole lot of cultural things in it.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated story of what happens when you blend all these kind of past traumas and ethnicities and all that stuff. And it takes place all in Boston, which is a
Okay.
place I have never lived.
Okay.
But
So,
it wanted to be in Boston.
we've talked about characters changing their minds or, changing their character arc. We've talked about plots changing because of things that happen. And, authors talk about how sometimes they feel like they don't have a lot of control. This is the first time that I've heard of the setting demanding it be the setting. Apparently, Boston wanted in on this book, and it was going to be the setting. Books want what they want, and not even their authors can argue with them, apparently. We're going to go ahead and take our third break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about those 2 points of view that we were just talking about in the work in progress. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Lisa C. Taylor. Before the break, we were talking about her current work in progress and the fact that it's set in Boston, which it kind of demanded that it be set in Boston. So let's go ahead and return to that conversation, still talking about the work in progress and those dual points of view. The childhood friends are the two voices, each of their points of view. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it's Elsa and Patrick, and yes, so I have Patrick chapters and I have Elsa chapters, and I think the story is mostly, and it's also my poetry stuff kicks in here, and it kicks into this too. A lot of people say this book is very lyrical. I think that one is even more so. There are repeated lines So it's a really kind of a hybrid form.
Mm,
Uh, so it's got a little haunting to it. And it's definitely it's a very dark story. I mean, there's a lot of danger in his job, so there's a lot of darkness in it.
sure. Yeah,
So darkness happens. So,
it
those
does.
people who are more a fan of the thriller, I mean, I probably will never write a thriller, although the third book that I'm working on it has the potential. It's about
Okay.
a witness protection program, so we'll see where that goes.
Thriller adjacent at the very least.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know where it's going. It just came to me, and that one did not come from a short story. It was
Okay.
born, it's meant to be a novel.
Okay.
And I'm hoping while I'm in Australia, New Zealand, that's my plan to write 5 hours a day
Okay.
because I do really well when I'm not home. I have no
Okay.
responsibilities.
You're right.
Always a good thing.
Although I don't know, there's the beauty might be a little bit distracting. You'll just have
Yeah.
to not look out a window.
Well, I'll walk 3 or 4 hours a day, but it's
Oh,
so
okay,
good.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I walk every morning. I was out this morning, so yeah, that's important. But yeah.
Okay.
So anything else you want to ask me? I
Yeah. So, I mean, you've always written, you said. What was the impetus that pushed you to write for publication at some point?
That's a good question. Yeah, I started writing at 12. My little story, and I won the National Scholastic Writing Award first prize for poetry when I was 17. So I
Wow.
got some outside validation very early, but not
Hmm.
from my family. Nobody else in my family is really a writer. And I didn't publish. I raised two kids, really astoundingly wonderful kids. I'm very lucky.
Hmm.
And didn't write. And then they grew up, kids grow up,
You do
which is
that.
nice. Yeah, it's a good thing when they do.
Yeah.
So I actually went back to school to get an MFA when my kids were grown. So I
Mm.
did it kind of later in life. And that's what really got me publishing. I had had a chapbook of poetry before. Then I'd sent out, I'd been in magazines, but nothing really big. But then I went on this trajectory. And the other thing that really pushed me is I got a fellowship to work in Ireland with an Irish writer who I met at a writers' conference. I was always going to these conferences when I could. And I met her, and we really kind of clicked, as people do. And I said, I'm going to apply for this thing. I won't get it, but if I get it, will you work with me? And anyway, she said she would. I've just had a problem with my Zoom. But anyway, she said she would. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. She said she would, and I got the fellowship, and I spent a month in Ireland working with her. Well, we were together the whole month. We were together like a week in a stone cottage that I rented because I could pay for all this stuff. And she became a friend. We found out we had a lot in common. We did not know that because we had just met. And her publisher, we did a book together of poetry called The Other Side of Longing, which was poems from both sides of the Atlantic. And her publisher really liked the poems and asked me if I had a solo collection, which I did. It was my MFA thesis. So he published that. Then she told him I write short stories, and he asked if I had short stories. So he ultimately published two collections of short stories and three collections of poetry of mine.
Okay.
But the novel, he doesn't do novels, and I knew it was time for me to find an American publisher, so I did.
Okay. From your experience, what piece of advice would you give for people who would like to write?
Get used to rejection.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find a lot of people, students or people just beginning to write and publish, is like, okay, I've had a few rejections. That's it. I don't want to do this anymore. Why do people do this? And the truth is that rejection is just part of the game. And that's true of anything you want to do. Writing is, it's competitive, but it's also subjective. So it's not a reflection that you're a terrible writer. It may be that you matched it wrong. You sent it to a magazine that would never publish anything like you write. I mean, I don't write thrillers or mysteries or romance, and there are certain publishers that really are only interested in that. So if I were to send to them, they would not be interested in my work, which
Right.
is not that I don't know how to write. It just means that I'm not doing my research right, to research a publisher that would publish this type of thing. We just had an agent at our writers conference, and she said, not to call it literary fiction, call it upmarket fiction. And I really
Oh,
like that because
okay.
It's kind of true because upmarket implies, it's contemporary, it can sell, and it doesn't make it in this elite category like, oh, a literary fiction. Well, I'm going to need, a master's degree to understand it. And that isn't like that. I mean, my characters are accessible. They're not,
Yeah.
just they may be professors, but in my other book, they're not professors. So, it just fell out. It happened that way. So, yeah, I just think you have to get used to rejection. And you have to understand it's not personal.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who's judged a lot of contests and read a lot of stuff, it really isn't personal. I mean, sometimes it's just this isn't what we're looking for, but you're a good writer.
Right.
You know,
Right.
maybe it's too themed towards something or too. I'm an editor for an online magazine called Word Piece, and we have that. We have a theme, and then some people ignore the theme and they send us something really violent or just it's just inappropriate for our magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their fault.
Yeah.
Send it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I just think getting used to rejection is probably the most important thing that makes is the difference between a published writer and an unpublished writer. A
Right.
published writer is persistent and deals with it and
Yeah.
just keeps trying even if they get a lot of rejection. I could paper my walls with rejection.
Yeah.
I've got lots of them. We all do. Anybody who sends out gets lots of rejections, so
Yeah.
that would be my advice is if you really want to be a writer, and also find a writers group, find people who are willing to listen and give you feedback, who get you.
Yeah.
And some I have a writing group that's been going on for we figured 32 years.
Oh, wow.
We were very young when we started, and we're still going on over Zoom, and now people live all over. And
Yeah. I was just thinking the technology for how you have that writing group has changed in 32 years.
oh yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, geography is no barrier. And one of my writing group people from 32 years came in for the writers conference, so he stayed with us, and really cool. I mean, he'd
Yeah.
never seen this part of the country, and it was pretty cool for him. And and he's another one who really didn't publish a lot, but now is starting to publish.
Yeah.
And amazing writer, amazing writer. But not everybody, and also it's your own journey.
Yep.
Some people feel like I just write in a journal, and I'm fine with that, and I don't really want to share my writing. It's personal.
Yeah.
And I would never judge that. If people don't want to publish, they don't have to publish.
Right.
But if you're a really good writer and you want to publish, just keep trying,
Yeah.
keep trying. Find people who appreciate your kind of writing in a writing group and can help make you better, you
Yeah.
know, who aren't they don't always feel like they have to say, "Oh, it's great, you're wonderful, you're perfect."
Right.
That like they can give constructive criticism, which is the kind that we all need, which is that doesn't make sense. That character, you just changed her personality. How do you
Right. Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
like they told me the ending wasn't working and I kept trying until it did.
Right. Or you just switched points of view and tense in this paragraph 6 times. And
Right.
I mean, I've read books that I think, where was your editor? Seriously, who let this?
Yeah. And I'm really happy to say that the editor from this press, I haven't found a typo yet. And I've read stuff from, Simon and Schuster and the big ones and found typos.
Yep.
And I think it's pretty well edited, which pleases me because I hate things that aren't well edited. It really irritates me.
It's always jarring to me. It kind of takes me out of the story for a moment.
Absolutely.
I have to say that is impressive. It's been a while since I've read anything with 0 typos. I mean, especially not my own texts. Can't seem to proofread to save my life anymore. But when I read novels, good editing is very important, and maybe that makes me a hypocrite since I stink at proofreading my own texts. But it definitely takes me out of the moment when there's like a really glaring typo or lots of consistency issues or continuity issues. Maybe I'm a snob, but it is what it is. We are going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, what does Lisa read in her spare time? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Lisa C. Taylor. Before the break, we were talking about editing and the importance of good editing and how it brings joy to my heart. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Lisa. When you take time to read just for you, favorite authors, genres?
Yeah, I'm kind of a Colin McCann groupie. I love Colin McCann. I don't know if you've read him, but I just finished Twist, his latest book. There's nothing he's written that I haven't read. What I like about him and is that he reinvents himself with every book, and he does a lot of research. And I learn things I don't know. Like this book, Twist, is about people that repair the cables at the bottom of the ocean that bring a lot of our communications. I know nothing about that. Nothing.
No,
He
fascinating.
wrote one about Nureyev. He has a book of short stories called 13 Ways, which I think is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. It's so phenomenal that I reference it in The Shape of What Remains because her mother-in-law reads it and talks
Yes.
about the short story treaty, which is an amazing short story. I
I say
got
that's why
some,
it sounds familiar. Yes.
yeah. I love Colin McCann. I like Ocean Vuong. I just finished his new book, The Emperor of Gladness. Empress of Gladness. Um, and he's a really interesting and very young writer. He's only in his 30s and definitely one to watch. I will buy when we on my long flight to New Zealand from New Zealand back home. I'm gonna read Wally Lamb's new book. I haven't read it, The River's Waiting. I know him because we lived in the same community. His kids went
Mm,
to school with my kids,
okay.
uh, and I've liked most everything he writes. So I'm gonna purchase that. But I'm trying because I'm a really fast reader. I'm trying to save it so that because I know if I have it in my book stand, I will,
Yeah.
read it right away. Chamananda Abachai, I think I'm saying that right. She has a new book out. I haven't read that one yet, but it's on my book stand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read widely. Jhumpa Lahiri I like very much. So I like a lot of international writers, uh,
Hmm.
but not just international writers. I like writers that make me think and develop a world that I don't know.
Yeah.
I like to finish it and think, wow. And even with the Ocean Vuong's new book, he's talking about his younger self. Most of his books are kind of hidden memoir, that helped a woman who had dementia when he was
Mm.
younger and actually lived with her for a time and worked in a fast food place. And a lot of us have worked in fast food places, and it's just a really interesting story. And he's very lyrical because he was started as a poet, so that lyricism makes its way into everything he writes.
Yeah.
So I think he's a rock star. As far as poetry, I love Patricia Smith. I love Kim Adnesio. I was kind of a Tony Hoagland groupie. He died, I think in 2018. I met him a bunch of times. I thought he was amazing, kind of a smart-ass poet, really witty. And my students always loved him because he just really spoke the way they thought a lot of
Mm.
times.
Hmm.
And a really nice and generous man. So very sad for the poetry world that he died young. Um, yeah, so I like a lot of poets. And I'm always finding new ones. I write book reviews, and I wrote a book review a couple of years ago, or maybe, yeah, I think it was a couple of years for Kelly Russell Agadan, whose work I didn't know. And boy, did I love that book.
Mm.
Really loved it. So I'm looking forward to her next book. So she's another young, well, I don't know how young she is, but she's one to watch. She's really amazing. Susan Rich, another amazing writer. Geraldine Mills, my Irish friend, has a new book of short stories coming out next year. Uh, really looking forward to that. She's an amazing writer. I pretty much like everything she writes. She gave me a couple in an anthology, and I was kind of knocked me over. They were so good.
Nice.
And she takes
Okay.
a lot of risks, and you'd never know it to meet her. She's kind of quiet, and you read this stuff and go, wow. So yeah,
Yeah.
always willing to discover new writers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well,
um,
thank you.
yeah. Now I
Um,
have your book list all set, right?
yeah, well, it's so long, it's never going to be. I'm not going to make a dent, but it
Yeah,
doesn't stop me
yeah.
from adding things of, oh, that sounds good. I'd love to read that someday. Um, if people want to know more about you and the novel, the short stories, the poetry, website, and any social media that you're active on.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. Who isn't? I'm on Instagram, and you just have to remember it's Lisa C. Taylor. The picture on Facebook has me holding The Shape of What Remains, so that's pretty obvious. Um, Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, I am not on X. I'm on just Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm not
Okay.
on TikTok yet, although that could happen at some point. I have a website, lisactaylor.com. You can find all my latest events under events.
Hmm.
Try to keep it updated, and I usually put the podcasts under media. So, and you can email me through my website. There's a
Okay.
connection to do that.
All right.
And I love responding. I'm also on Goodreads, and bookshop.org. And bookshop.org is a great alternative. And I'm under Four Corners Writers too. We have our own bookshop. Four Corners Writers is people in this region, and we're all
Hmm.
different genres. And so we have our own little bookshop on bookshop.org, which gives money to small bookstores. So it's a really good thing to support.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an indie bookstore because you live in a remote place, you can order online through bookshop.org, and it can help your favorite indie bookstore
Yeah.
anywhere.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lisa, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure you highlight or mention at this time?
Um, no, I think we kind of covered a lot. I can't
Okay.
think of anything. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything. It
Oh,
just, if you want to write, just keep doing it.
yeah.
You do get better, and you kind of have to write what you want to write. That's my advice. I know a lot of people do write things because they want to sell them.
Right.
And maybe that's my doom, that I'll never make a lot of money on it, but I want to write what I want to write. I want to write things that make people think and maybe change how they see something. So
Yeah.
that's my quest as a writer.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me about The Shape of What Remains, but everything else as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much to Lisa for joining me to talk about this book. And as I said, everything else that we talked about today, if you are a fan of, well, books that have a lot of really good, strong relationships, books that are complicated, books that talk about hard topics, then this is one that you will want to check out. Like I said, it doesn't always have easy topics, but it's a book that in the end does have a lot of hope in it. So maybe you've experienced grief, maybe you need to read about someone else's experience with grief and to feel some of that hope as Teresa navigates her way through the grief. Not necessarily to any amazing conclusions. Oh, poof, look there, the grief is over, life moves on. No, but to see how she continues to live with it, how she moves forward, how things finally start falling into place for her a little bit. Maybe not everything, because life's not perfect. Today has been a fine example of that for me. Life is definitely not perfect. So definitely check out this book if you would like, or if you know somebody who enjoys literature of this form, then recommend it to them or buy it for them as a gift. That's always good. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you will join me next time. I have 2 interviews this weekend, which means 2 episodes again next week. The first of which is a fifth of the story by Dr. Catherine Hutchinson Hayes. This is a thriller. It is full of action, intrigue, plot twists, betrayal. It's chock full of all those good elements of a thriller. It's a CIA agent, and there is just nonstop action, pretty much start to finish. So join me for the conversation on Tuesday with Catherine. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast and you haven't done so already, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching the episode on. Again, that helps out the algorithm, as does leaving a positive review. Please, if you haven't done so, I would ask you to leave a positive review. That is incredibly helpful. And if you're on social media and would like to follow the podcast, you can do so at Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. Come find the podcast. By extension, you get me. You can ask questions. You can let me know what books you're reading, what books you've read by the authors I speak to, what new authors you found from these interviews. I love hearing all of it. So come find the podcast on social media. I hope you've had a great week. I hope you have absolutely the weekend that you want coming up. But whatever else happens, if you need this time to rejuvenate and restore your book-loving soul, I hope the weekend gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to